So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion today. I'll end with my thanks in just a moment. But one of the things that I want to share is, as you know, many of us at the University of St. Thomas, many of you, have been on this journey to ensure that our university is more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. Some of you have been on this journey at St. Thomas for decades, some for just a couple years, some for just a few months, depending on how long you have been with us and the opportunities that you've had to plug into some of this work. One of the things that has inspired me and really made me actually most proud of our university has been the intense commitment I've seen to this journey, particularly over the last 12 months. And I've seen this commitment throughout every facet of the university, faculty, staff, students, alumni. And it is a journey, and we need each other to successfully make this journey. And there really is no end to the journey. Success is defined by staying committed to the journey. And we have to support each other in staying committed to the journey. You know, we all experience this world through our own lenses and through our own experiences. I'm a white, female, heterosexual, married, only lived in the U.S., some in the South, some in the North, practiced Protestant and Catholic religions. That and many other things have helped shape the experiences that I've had in my life, and also sometimes shape the lenses through which I might see the world. But all of us have to invest in this journey, both personally and in the University of St. Thomas. So personally, we all want to invest in this journey by understanding how our experiences and our lenses shape what we see and how we've experienced the world, gaining a deeper understanding of that, gaining a deeper understanding of how other people's identities and experiences shape how they've experienced the world and maybe their lenses, gaining understanding and empathy for one another, understanding our own implicit biases, because every one of us has them in some way, but recognizing them and working to eliminate them. And then understanding that we live in institutions. We now live in the University of St. Thomas institution. But the structures and the policies in our institution do not always present an even playing field for everyone. And where are there instances in which we find policies, structures within our institution that are inhibiting our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey? And what can we do as individuals to help change those structures or policies to ensure we are more diverse, we are more equitable, and we are more inclusive? So we're committed to all of that, but that's huge. And I just want to encourage everyone to continue to support one another, because sometimes we'll experience things that we want to celebrate in our journey, and sometimes we'll experience setbacks in our journey. And it wouldn't be a journey without setbacks, by the way. It doesn't mean we failed. We've only failed if we stop becoming committed to our journey. So thank you for being here today to show that commitment. And I especially want to thank Ka Yang, who has joined us as our Vice President for Inclusive Excellence. I am so grateful for her leadership. She has been on this journey for decades. I'm not saying how old you are, Ka. And she has also been on this journey personally, but also at other institutions. And she has a lot of expertise to bring to bear for all of us to learn from. I'm very grateful for everyone who's agreed to participate in the panel, all of you who are here, and Vanita, who is our moderator. So thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I thought I would start with a little story about why DEI matters to me. So, all of you in the audience, when you look at me, you can probably guess that I'm Asian American, that I have black hair, brown eyes. These are the characteristics that are on top of the iceberg, the diversity iceberg that you can see visually. But underneath that iceberg, what you don't see, that it's not visible to the eyes, is that you might not know that I was, a refugee to this country. I was first generation college graduate in my family. And when I went to meet with my college professor, my college advisor, my sophomore year in college, my advisor tried to persuade me that for someone who looked like me, I should probably change major into something else because my people would probably benefit better and benefit more should I switch majors. And as a young adult, had I listened to these types of advices, these types of stereotypes, biases from individuals, I would not be standing in front of you today as Associate Vice President for Inclusive Excellence. And so what is the point of my story? The point of my story is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a lifelong journey. And that story that I had just shared, that happened over 20 years ago. So now you're getting closer to how old I am, even though Dr. Sullivan didn't give that away. There's a lot of work ahead of us. And there are going to be days when we want to celebrate, and we should celebrate. And then there are going to be days when we are going to cry, pull our hair out, and just quit. Because that is the reality of culture change. That is the reality of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a lifelong journey, and it's a journey that never ends. So that brings me to the action plan to combat racism. Many individuals have reached out to me to ask, where are we at? And is this action plan to combat racism, is it really working? Are we becoming a more inclusive environment on campus? And my short answer would be yes and no. I know that's probably the answer that you don't want to hear, but that's the reality of this work. It goes back to my point earlier that it's a lifelong journey. There are going to be days when we look at the strides that we've made to become a more inclusive environment. There are going to be days when we look and realize there's so much to be done in this space. Incidents are happening across campus. Insensitive comments are being shared. But it's a journey. Let's keep that in mind, that back to Dr. Sullivan's point, success is when we continue on this journey and we commit. We're not going to be perfect in this space. It's going to be growing pains. And we just learn that we can get better at this as things occur. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details in terms of the accomplishments that we've had related to the action plan to combat racism, because as you can see, we have a wonderful panel up here. And I believe that by the time you leave here, you would get a better sense of what's happening in the DEI space. But I would like to just give my observations about the action plan to combat racism. When I read the action plan, I see two key themes. I see short-term goals and I see long-term goals. When it comes to the short-term goals, they tend to speak to individual and group inclusion on campus. They tend to speak to what are the programmings that we have in place, what are the support services, and what are the trainings that we are providing. And when you look through the action plan in terms of the short-term goals, you can pretty much sort of check mark all the things that we've done in that space. We've opened the Intercultural Center, we improved our reporting system to report hate and bias crimes. I am chairing the DART group, which is Diversity Action Response Team, and we meet monthly to discuss how we can be a more inclusive environment and how to be more proactive as opposed to being reactive. We don't need to wait for something to happen to address it. Faculty have, reached out to me that they're having brave discussions in their classrooms. After the incident at Ireland Hall, there were several faculty members who reached out and said, we talked about this in class because we want to acknowledge that although it is unfortunate that it happened on our campus, it's the reality of our world. In addition to that, we've held restorative circles and facilitated discussions around race during welcome days, around diversity in general. We rolled out Diversity EDU to the student group, and over 94% of our incoming freshmen took the online training. That's a huge percentage, 94%. And then getting back to the action plan, so I see those more as the short-term goals, right? And we're not here to check the box. We're here for good. We're here to stay. We are committing to a lifelong journey. The action plan also states the long-term goals. And the way I see the long-term goals are the infrastructure changes within our institution. What are our policies? What are our practices? What are the procedures? Which groups are benefiting from the way that we operate at St. Thomas? Which groups may be left out? Which groups may not even have access to our institution? And some of the observations that I've seen as successes in this area, we have a policy committee that which has started more recently to review our policies. They are called UART, the University Action, UART. So this is where my newness comes in, 4 months. I still don't know all the acronyms. So just know that UART is a group that we meet to review policies within the institution to see where we are headed. We are also looking to recruit and retain students, staff, and faculty of color. We've changed and the admissions group have done a wonderful job. They've changed the financial aid program to make it more accessible to support individuals with needs so that they can have more access to our institution. We went from 17% to 20% this year, student of color. And in addition to that, we are reviewing the option to eliminate test scores on college applications. So are we perfect in our journey? No, we are not. Are we trying and are we committed? Yes, we are. So along the lines of the short-term goals and the long-term goals, right, the individual inclusion, the group inclusion, as well as our infrastructure, my office, the Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, will be rolling out a climate survey this fall. And I would say within 1 week, within the next couple of weeks, all of us across campus will receive information on how to take that survey. The climate survey will help us assess the individual and group inclusion, behaviors, attitudes, perceptions, experiences on campus. And then in the spring, my office will roll out an audit or an assessment. I will work with a third-party vendor to take a deep dive into the history of St. Thomas. Who are we? What is our infrastructure? And what are our strengths? Who has access to different programs? Who we are today, who's benefiting from that, and who might be left out, as I mentioned earlier. So with the climate survey, along with the audit, there will be many opportunities for all of us to engage in conversations around focus groups, just around the results, okay? Because that I think that many people have also reached out to me to say, we also want more information about what's being done in this space. And so we are committed to transparency, that when all the data is collected, we will provide opportunities for people to come hear the results and to also share their opinions and have their voices heard. Eventually, all of this then will filter and be used to develop the university's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan. And with that plan, it will highlight our key mission, vision, themes, measurable goals and objectives for the next 3 to 5 years. And as I mentioned in the letter that I had sent out earlier, I think last week, or maybe this week, I'm losing track of time here. No single plan will help us stop racism or any of the ism on campus. It takes all of us to take a deep dive into ourselves. What is our power? What is our privilege as an individual? How do we want to be treated on campus? And how do we use what we have to be able to also change culture? And so my hope is that we'll have an overarching strategic plan and that my office will also be able to reach out and have the opportunity to work with all the different areas to also develop their own strategic plan, because it really does take all of us to embed inclusion. And so I'm probably already running out of time, so I will close it at that so that we will have enough opportunity to hear from our panel. I just want to give kind of a quick scope overview of what to expect for the rest of the time that we have here. Vanita Sarkar will moderate the panel discussion. And then after that, we will leave about 20 minutes for questions, comments at the end, and then we will wrap up with closing remarks. So without much further ado, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Vanita.
Thank you so much, Ka. Hello, everyone. I'm Vanita Sarkar, Senior Media Relations Manager here at the university, and I was honored to be invited to moderate this panel, very distinguished panel. And this is really an opportunity for all of us to discuss, interact. There'll be Q&A at the end. We'll have microphones going around. So be thinking of some of the questions you may want to ask a panel member or just to open up. I think to start, we need to meet our fabulous panel. So what I'm going to do is go down the line this way, and if you can please say your name, your role at the university, and in under a minute, if you can do it, why is this DEI journey important to you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Viridiana Arevalo Martinez. I am a junior studying leadership and management and minoring in justice and peace studies. The DEI journey is very important to me because it's a personal journey. Even though I love to say that I bleed purple because of all of my involvement on campus, I have had my own personal struggles as a person of color and first-gen student here at St. Thomas, which has motivated me a lot to become a part of this collective, committed journey.
Hello, everybody. My name is Logan Monahan. I am a senior studying neuroscience with a minor in justice and peace studies, and I am the student body president of the undergraduate student government. The DEI journey is really important to me because when I was running for student government, student body president, I chose to run under the platform of We Are Better Together. And this is something that I have been trying to do ever since I was elected, is trying to build a better community at St. Thomas and recognizing everybody's differences. And really just trying to make our community more inclusive based on race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ability, and all of those things. It doesn't just stop at race. I want everybody here at St. Thomas to feel welcome and included, and that they all have a purpose to be on this campus.
I'll just keep my comments really short. So to me, diversity, equity, inclusion is not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. We are in an evolving world and we have to keep up with it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Linway, Dean of the Opus College. DEI is personal to me. My parents were Holocaust refugees, so I've sort of grown up feeling things are tentative always, because it was for my parents. And it's also a conviction of the university, which I take very seriously.
Michele Hong, I'm Vice President and Founding Dean of the College of Health. I'm day 3 on the job, but been on the DEI journey all my life. I believe that it's the way that we treat each other and the worth that we find in each other that makes us good human beings, moral and important in the world. And I've seen, as a former refugee, when that hasn't happened. So I'm a generation away from Stephanie, and I've also overcome a lot of adversity in my life, and believe that everybody should have not just an opportunity, but help to get through the door, to access better things in their lives. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming this afternoon. My name is Michele Tom. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer here at St. Thomas. And as other speakers have alluded to, it's our experiences, I think, that shape us. And for me personally, growing up as a low-income, first-generation college student with 13 brothers and sisters, that those experiences manifested in me the personal values of justice and equity. And also, as many of you know, and many of you students will soon find out, it's almost impossible for those personal values that we hold so deeply to not spill over into our professional life. And so those are the values that I'd like to think that I bring to my work here professionally at St. Thomas.
Thanks. I'm Ann Johnson with the Office of Faculty Advancement, and like everyone else, DEI is a very personal journey for me too. I've always been highly motivated by social justice goals and values, and the importance of justice, equity. As a longtime teacher here at St. Thomas, I noticed quite a while ago that there were always some students in my classes who you could sense just didn't feel quite as if they belonged. And when I moved into this administrative role, it became really important to me to focus in on how we could provide faculty with the supports and resources that they could use to make their classes more inclusive and make sure that all students have equal access.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Brianna French, a professor in graduate psychology and one of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Fellows with Ann's Office of Faculty Development. And diversity, equity, inclusion is important for me personally as an identity. I identify as Black biracial, I'm an amputee, and I'm first generation college student. And so there are sorts of ways that I want to try to create a world where people feel authentic, affirmed, and a sense of belonging, particularly as a psychologist. I think that's essential for our well-being. And quoting Paul Wellstone, we all do better when we all do better. So I want to try to create that environment here at St. Thomas.
My name is Melissa Lowe. I'm in the Math Department here, and I also am directing a 5-year, $1 million grant for St. Thomas from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute for inclusion and excellence, inclusive excellence in STEM. For me, like for all of us, it's a personal journey, but it's the right thing to do, and that's one thing that motivates me. It's not a zero-sum game, and by inclusive excellence, everybody wins. And it also makes our experience, our lives, our future richer.
My name is Nikisha Lewis. I am the marketing department chair as well as a professor in marketing. I am also one of the DEI fellows under faculty development as well. DEI is important for me just because my hope is that when future Nikisha Lewises are out there from inner city St. Louis, that I can make life a little bit easier for them. That instead of always striving, they can just thrive, that they can have a space that offers them that some of the barriers aren't there. And so they are able to just focus on being students or focus on their work and not have other aspects weighing them down.
Buenas tardes. My name is Patricia Condra Brooks, and I work in student affairs. And when I reflect on what diversity, equity, and inclusion means to me, it's personal and it's also professional. Personal, I am a Latina immigrant. I have worked and lived most of my life in spaces that were not meant for me, spaces where I felt uncomfortable, spaces where I had to grow, and spaces where I learned a lot about myself. As a professional, I stepped foot on 1988, which tell you how old I am. I think I'm the oldest person in this panel, at Oklahoma State University doing work in minority student services. And my career in higher education for over 20-some odd years has been to work with underrepresented students on campus, to provide them with the tools of their own cultural capital, to realize that they have linguistic capital, aspirational capital, resilient capital, and then they, even though the spaces were not made for them, will be here, will thrive, will survive, and will change our world.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Campbell. I'm the Dean of the School of Education. And it's always hard to be the last person to share. But Gloria Lansing-Billings, who is someone that I deeply respect and has influenced a lot of my work, once said that her life is part of her research and her research is part of her life. And that's what DEI means to me. I actually don't know how to separate it. As an African American female who has to deal with barriers every day, and while I do have some privilege, obviously sitting in a dean's position, you do have privilege, I also recognize that I tend to show up in teacher education spaces as the only person of color, especially in leadership positions. And so I'm also really paying attention to the fact that there are children in this community who need to see individuals in every single position. And so I don't take that lightly, but it's been part of my life since I was born, and it will continue to be.
Thank you so much to all of you. It's wonderful to hear all of your different perspectives. You've been hearing that this is a journey, that we're all in this together, and I think that is the purpose of this event, bringing everyone together. To start off, I think it would be really interesting to hear from different panel members, and this is how it's going to be structured. We've got a mic here, a mic in the middle, and a mic in the end. Feel free to raise your hand if you want the mic to come towards you. Each panel member won't answer every question, and I might direct something at a specific panel member. We may get a back and forth. Really, again, this is about exchanging ideas and discussion. So first off, and you can raise your hand if you want to start off, what are some of the successes in the past year as we have traveled this DEI journey? It's important to point out maybe what's working or is on the verge of bringing people together. Perhaps share what you're doing in your own personal journey, initiatives you have participated in, or maybe even helped coordinate. I think it's important for people to hear maybe from different aspects of the university that we don't get to encounter or be a part of. So would anyone would like to share a little bit about maybe what you're doing on your own personal journey that seems to be working, or something you've been a part of? All right, Stephanie. Go ahead.
I'll tell a story where everybody's collecting their thoughts.
Good.
That's what we do in business school.
Good.
So recently I got a note from a alum who's in our MBA program. And some of you may not spend time on the Minneapolis campus, but there were very nice photographs of students, having fun at St. Thomas. And one of the captions was, "Good business is good for everyone." And the photograph was of 4 white guys. This student identifies as African American. He was a journalism student. He loves St. Thomas. He pointed out that everyone is not represented in this advertisement. White adults, primarily white men, are represented. The message this advertisement conveys is the Opus College of Business, and good business is primarily for white men. And I'm looking around, wow. And so personally, I walk to school, I walk by there, I never noticed. And then he goes on to point out that the Doherty family college students walk by. And what message are we sending to them? Are they welcome at Opus? Alvin and the dean of the Doherty Family College and I are raising money together for his students to come to Opus. At the same time, I see the picture and did nothing. The good news is I got the message. I sent it to Kim, who sent it to Jim Brummer. First, Amy tried to scratch the pictures down. They'd been there for so long that it didn't go very well. And Jim came over with his guys, and they were down in a heartbeat. And to me, it really reminds me personally, but us as a community, that we have to bring more awareness to not only how we promote business, but how we practice business. And we need a diverse set of eyes on how we project our image. to attract a diverse set of students who are the future students of St. Thomas. So it was a difficult story. I think we have a happy alum, and my development director will see him in 20 years and make sure he's happy. And he works at Cargill. I think this story has ripple effects. I think we'll have a better image at Cargill. We'll have a better image in a community, and we have the opportunity to reflect on how important this is.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I do want to point out, too, just being a member of the Marketing Insights Communication team, we have a committee looking at ways that we can approach DEI and diversity in our marketing materials. So we certainly are aware and conscious of things like that. So it's good. Good that we have a discussion about this. Kathleen, I'm curious, you have done a lot in the last year, or since you started, to work on bringing the community together in conversation. How has that worked? And do you think that that is something that is working for our university?
So I will start with, I think it's everyone in the School of Ed. I always make sure that I don't take credit for what my faculty and staff have all done. But we've had monthly racial literacy roundtable discussions starting last November. And we offer them to anyone who wants to come. So they're free. And I talk to school systems about it. I talk to teachers, superintendents, our own students, just because I think it's more powerful to have a community start to address what's going on. And that's the first step. On top of it, we've created a DEI statement for the School of Education, and I have a DEI committee that's representative of all my different teams and departments in the School of Ed, so everyone has a voice. And we also have a monthly book club that everyone participates in. Last year, we read Culturally Sustaining Pedagogies, so we could start to reimagine what education could look like, because it doesn't exist right now. So we're really trying to build something that we don't know what it looks like, to be quite honest. This year, my faculty and staff voted for the new Jim Crow, so we actually start that in 2 weeks at our School of Education meeting. And what we did with Culturally Sustaining Pedagogies is at the end, my group and the Daugherty Family College came together in August as faculty members, and we start to look at the syllabi and make sure that we have culturally sustaining activities in every single course, because it's one thing to have one course that talks about diversity and equity and inclusion, but it should be in everything we do. And if we're preparing, in my case, educators, leaders, individuals who are going to interact with different students from our student affair program, then I need to make sure that they're actually going to treat all individuals with respect and honor. And so we're really making sure that we're taking an honest look at ourselves.
I'd love to hear the student perspective too on this. What's reaching students? What's working? What are the things that you think you'd like to point to?
So I think as student government, our top priority is representing students and making sure that we're listening to all students across campus. A little over a year ago, the action plan to combat racism was rolled out. And we, as a student government, within 2 weeks of that action plan, had created a what we call the Action Plan Oversight Subcommittee of the student government. And this collected various members from across our general council who felt passionate about fighting this issue, and has really developed into this great group of students on the student government that meet with all the administration very frequently and make sure that there are things getting done and holding them accountable. But not only that, also collaborating, because I think the majority of this affects students at St. Thomas, and therefore we felt the need that students need to be in there, in these meetings, making sure that the work that's doing is going to reflect and help students. Vivi, you can speak more on that too.
Thanks, Logan. I forgot to mention that I'm also a part of the undergraduate student government as the Vice President of Equity Inclusion. And what we really like about the Action Plan Oversight Subcommittee is that it's students holding administration accountable, but not telling them what to do. So instead, we're just getting feedback and we're asking for core deadlines, core numbers, everything. And we're like, okay, I'll see you next month, same time, same date, and you give me an update based on what we talked about. So it's not us telling administration what to do, because we recognize that that's not our job, and we don't get paid to do that. So we're not going to do that kind of work. And it's not just USG students, but it's other students across campus, e-board leaders of multicultural clubs, e-board leaders of the QSA club, commuter students. It's students all across the spectrum. So we're really happy that this is going to continue happening this school year. And based on last year, it happens to be like monthly meetings. Another thing that undergraduate student government has is the Diversity Relations Committee, which consists of multicultural club leaders and the QSA club, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Maybe some initiative comes out of their proposals, questions. It's just a space where we can freely speak about how we feel about the university, because I think one of the main concerns that we have is that it feels like everything's above our heads, and we kind of feel like we don't have a control over anything, which is where Logan and I come in and make sure to make that bridge happen between students and administration, and make it known and seen that administration is doing something. And that way it also helps keep me and Logan accountable to our jobs. Another thing that's really exciting that we're doing is we're having a new art installation in ASC on the second floor by the Student Diversity Inclusion Services Office and the Office of International Scholars. So we have paired with a company named Just the Position, which works with the community and serves underrepresented students. And this committee consists of me, other students, and other staff and faculty. And we are being very intentional about the process. As you might know, there's a mural in Murray Herrick, which is just kind of just chilling down there. No one really knows what it is anymore. And it's a very stereotypical painting that can be hurtful. So we're being very intentional with this. It's going to be like a year-long process, but we do want student engagement and community input in this process. So that's another thing that we've been working on.
Love hearing the student perspective. Really appreciate it. Anyone else with success or anything personally you're doing? Go ahead, Michele.
Thank you. I want to share a success over the last year, which many of you have participated in, called SEED, or Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity, and that is a national effort that several of us were trained in delivering and bringing back here to the University of St. Thomas. And the model works like this. We get together as a cohort, we share stories about our identities, we talk about our identities and their respective intersectionalities. We use those conversations to build trusting relationships with one another. And once we've built those trusting relationships, we work together to identify systemic barriers that should be broken down here at the University of St. Thomas. We have 7 trained facilitators now, and by the end of the academic year, we will have graduated 100 employees as part of that process. And while I've got the microphone, I think it would be really powerful if the people who have either participated, facilitated, or are a current participant would please stand up. Thanks to all of you, and just as a side note, this is work that goes above and beyond all of these individuals' daily work routines. So thank you to all of you for your commitment to that process.
And just, I've had some colleagues do it, Michele, and I tell you, I keep hearing how powerful it is. So that's great. Anyone else? I want to make, go ahead, Nikisha.
So I'll speak on a couple different successes. As I said before, I am one of the DEI fellows for faculty development. So one of the biggest ones we believe is just the creation of the position, recognizing that our faculty could use some assistance, some consultation, some training possibly in handling some of the issues. And so the truth is the fact that the university was even willing to recognize that and then create these positions for helping faculty, we think is a viable success. Along those lines, when we had the incident earlier this year, we were able to immediately go in and offer faculty a chance to, let's work on how we can talk through this. Do we integrate it into the classroom? Is it a direct conversation? But oh no, I'm afraid, how do I approach it? And so we offered faculty a chance to come in and have these moments of vulnerability, but also this idea of, yeah, it may be difficult, it may be challenging, but we're here to support you through the process. So there's no excuse for us just to hide away and do what I like to call the Minnesota stare, where we play like it's not there. right? One of the other things that I want to mention, because I am also a chair of the marketing department in Opus, is that I've seen Opus do a lot of great things as well. So one of the things they have is the culture committee, which Dean Linway, I'm sure, wanted to share with you all, that they have been working for, I think, since March, trying to develop a sure plan to help ensure that we are addressing the needs within the College of Business. Business is changing, so if we won't do it for the kumbaya, we can at least do it for the dollars. So the idea there, though, is really to think about it in a strategic way. What's happening? How do we best approach business? And then train our students to do that in a way that is helpful for them as well as the world that they are changing, right? Creating global business leaders, moral, ethical business leaders, and that's something that's relevant to us as well. We also have an undergraduate student version of that, a working group. They meet monthly. The students get to come out with staff and faculty and give feedback on how they can change that environment. So we have our undergraduate business committee and groups that are working to develop workshops and identify ways that students can get better at that process so they can be these good leaders that can address that. I have one more thing and then I'll pass the mic. As the chair of the marketing department, I personally have taken a role in questioning and pushing on my faculty and challenging themselves. And so each meeting, every month at our department meeting, we have a moment where we deal with DEI issues and how we are improving or areas of growth. And so whether that's coming in and sharing a personal story where they may have realized that they were the microaggressor, or it's an issue of, hey, I learned something I didn't know about, or I tried to address it in the classroom and it did or did not work. It's this idea of, as leadership, holding my faculty accountable and vice versa, them holding me accountable, we can all grow. So I just wanted to make sure I shared on the faculty end some of the things that we're doing, because the faculty has growing as well. It's not just a student thing. It's not just a staff thing, but it's us as well.
Okay. Oh, Patricia, did you want to? We'll wrap it up with you, and then we'll move on to the next
I'm a really
question.
fast talker.
Thanks.
So one of the things that I noticed, and one of the successes that I've seen, is changing demographics. And you're going to say, yeah, we increased the number of students, underrepresented students on campus, but I'm talking about the changing demographics of the students that are coming into the intercultural centers and the students that are coming to our events. So I'll use Sunday as an example. So we heard our third social justice summit on Sunday afternoon. We tripled our numbers. And what was interesting, it was the makeup of who was there. And when I looked around the room, I saw that there was probably 70% of the students that were there were majority white students attending. So that's also had us looking at what are we doing for programming, and where we're getting more and more students wanting to now engage in the inclusion part, right? That means, how do I grow my own identity? How do I look at my whiteness? How do I look at my white fragility? And we're having more students asking us to do some of this programming. So earlier during the summer, I had a conversation with Karen, who then passed it along to Dr. Plum, and they'd agreed that we needed to have dedicated person full-time in student diversity and inclusion services as a director to come in on campus and add to the work that we were doing. And so I'm gonna shout out to Alex Hernandez-Sigel, who's here. He's joining us with over 20 years of diversity and inclusion throughout the country, as we're looking to expand how we do the diversity work, no longer just focusing on educating about underrepresented identities, but really diving into the inclusion work and how does it mean to bring our white allies and white students and majority students into the D&I space.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we should move on to opportunities next. As we all know, there are many opportunities here at this university that we can grow in our journey, and it is a constant journey, a lifelong journey. So I'd like to throw it out to our panel. What are some key opportunities, places where we can grow in this DEI journey? From a student perspective, I'm really curious, what is the climate like right now? It's been a year. We've got that email from Ka updating us on things. I think a lot of us, we see the students, but we want to know what it's like and what are areas of opportunity.
I think there's always going to be some resentment and students who will feel like nothing is being done because, of course, not one action is enough, and I think we can all agree on that. But I personally decided to help close that bridge by going to student club meetings and actually presenting what has been happening on campus, because USG has struggled with some students asking us questions and coming up to us, but instead of sitting in our office and wait for students to come here. We've decided to go to the students instead and actually present the information to them. So personally, I've sent out emails to our student leaders and have asked, hey, if you allow me to take up some space in your meeting, that I can present to you what I've done, what the university has done, what is happening, what is planning to happen, which I hopefully will help students grasp the bigger things that we are doing as a university. So, but I do think that students are still very upset.
Thanks, Vivi. Also, I think that going back to community, it's something that I've really been working on is kind of student affairs and academics seem very opposite right now at this university as far as these issues and DEI, and making sure that the message that student affairs is giving these students, everybody's welcome. They're doing a great job. They make a lot of students here feel welcome and empowered and furthering these DEI initiatives through student affairs, and that's a great job. And then you go to the classroom, and there are a lot of professors that are not acknowledging these issues that are happening on campus, and there's just kind of a gap in there that not all students are participating in these events. Some students do come here just for school because that's what the university is here for. And I have really kind of seen that and been working a lot through USG on seeing how we can kind of bridge that gap between academics and student affairs to make sure that students do feel welcome and included in the classroom as well.
Michele?
So I see the major opportunity. I've actually known of St. Thomas because I grew up in St. Paul and have worked with staff and faculty at St. Thomas for a long time. I think when we recognize that DEI is not an initiative, that it is really about all of us, and it's about the university's mission, and that until we actually dismantle racism inside of ourselves, that we should be a part of the solution instead of actually pointing out what others should do, is when we will have arrived. Because this is the journey that we as a country have been on, and St. Thomas is a part of that. But until we see as individuals who work here and have the authority and or privilege to make a difference, we know the shape of our glasses, the privilege that we have, which means that we acknowledge reality for ourselves and what we've experienced. It's what Julie said about our own values and biases and ways of doing and being, because that shows up in the classroom, and it shows up when you're interacting with people who are different from you. We will not have arrived as a university, certainly as one. So that's the challenge and the opportunity to see DEI as not an initiative, but as something that is really true to our tradition and what we do. And it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to come to St. Thomas, because I believe we can do that. I've seen workplaces where we can. That doesn't mean it's easy. It's really, really hard. But we need to do some self-examination. And a lot of times people say, we have to go really fast, and who's the we? Do it for yourself. The last thing I want to hear as a person of color is that you as a white person feel guilty. Because you know what? Guilt is a self-serving emotion. Use your privilege as a weapon for good. Use it as a weapon for equity. Learn about your students and learn about what's actually happening. And don't talk as cheap. Align your behaviors with your values in the classroom, outside of the classroom, with everybody you engage with, so that we can all be together in delivering solutions. So it is not only Ka's job or Richard's job or Julie's job. It's all of our jobs. So I celebrate all of you who are actually here. And there was a long time ago when I was first starting off on this journey at Wilder, people told me it couldn't be done. People told me it was going to be too challenging. People told me that people would just start running away and that we couldn't be just preaching to the choir. And I'm telling you, the choir still needs to be singing the same song. And that's what we're not doing. So until we do that, as people who really care about life, DEI, St. Thomas, it will not happen. So that's the challenge to all of you, is to unite behind the things that can get done and get to work, just get to doing, even if it's just with yourself.
We haven't heard from Brianna, Melissa, and Anne. I'd love to get your perspective on opportunities.
Well, I work with faculty, and I think there are lots of opportunities there right now. I think we've made a lot of progress, which is great. But one of the things that's really challenging about St. Thomas is its size. We have 450 full-time faculty, and any given semester around 400 adjunct faculty, and reaching all those faculty, it's a real challenge. So I think that's going to be part of the puzzle we'll work on in the next coming years, is just how to expand our reach, and it's going to take some thinking, and also I think some partnering more closely with deans probably, and making sure that we reach through the schools and colleges, reach faculty that way. And I'll mention just one other thing, and this is not, it's kind of outside my actual area, but I'll put it out there because I hear it from faculty so much. I think an opportunity that we have is to align our faculty evaluation practices with our DEI goals, and right now they're not consistently lined up, and I'd like to see some work in that area in coming years.
Ditto. So I was also going to say accountability might be an area of improvement for us in faculty development. I think to address the student government concerns about having conversations in classrooms, that's another place that we want to address, offering opportunities for different levels of engagement, so that I think there could be potentially real harm done if somebody were to try to facilitate a conversation around DEI and they didn't feel ready or skillful or equipped. And so Dr. Lewis and I are thinking about ways to scaffold educational opportunities and professional development so that faculty can create inclusive environments in their classroom as a first step, all the way to moving towards institutional, structural, anti-racist change for the more advanced faculty members.
Thank you. So many opportunities, it's hard to know where to start. The grant that I'm working with was not my grant, it was not mine, it was Roxanne Pritchard in neuroscience and psychology was the author. It was a long process writing it, and one thing that, one of the primary factors that pushed her to write this was noticing that in STEM fields, students of color drop out of those STEM majors at twice the rate as majority students do. And those students still graduate from St. Thomas. They earn degrees, but they don't earn them in STEM. So there's some very powerful things going on in STEM at St. Thomas that need to change. So our grant is 3 prongs. The first prong deals with faculty development. Our Faculty Development Center has an Inclusive Classroom Institute, many good offerings, many really fabulous workshops and digging deep. But STEM faculty don't participate at the same strong rates that folks not on South Campus do. And so in digging for why this is true, STEM faculty largely see those opportunities as not for them, unless they're STEM flavored. STEM is different. You can't do the same things in STEM that you do in other areas. I'm not saying that's true, that's the perception. So we're building faculty development opportunities for STEM folks. Those have been very well attended, they've been appreciated, we're getting more ideas from faculty all the time. The second prong is with advising and mentoring of students in STEM, particularly, so we've done some, we've looked at some data with Tanya Jones-Peterson's help, and the markers that are good predictors of students who start out intending to major in STEM and leave that area, first-gen status, Pell Grant recipient, students of color from farther away than 100 miles, or commuting directly from home much closer than 100 miles. So we're working with students in those populations. We're putting in place some beefed up advising. We're not identifying the students, we're working on our advising. So we're not trying to fix students, we're trying to fix us. That's one piece. And the third piece has already been mentioned several times, and that's transformational change of this university, and in particular in STEM. all 57 of these $1 million grants that Howard Hughes Medical Institute gave out, and that HHMI is a biosciences research granting, a grant organization. So they fund research, but they're pouring their dollars into diversity, equity, inclusion, and in particular, inclusive excellence in STEM. They're saying this is important. So the funding organization wants long-term transformational change of the institution, and that's what we're working for. And in our very first rejected grant application was the commitment that we wanted to work toward annual assessment of faculty, including DEI progress and work. Some of the departments in STEM are further along in this than others are. Some departments have their own diversity, equity, inclusion committee, which is working toward inclusiveness in that discipline and initiating conversations. And one last thing that I wanted to bring up is over the last several years involved with the writing of this grant and grappling with what we can do short-term and long-term and how we put those pieces in place. It has been relationship building, conversations, communication, looking for partnerships across this university that has been the most productive and the most exciting. And the more I talk with people, the more opportunity I see for myself, for our students, for my colleagues, for friends at this university. So I think that getting to know people from many different areas is just a tremendous asset for us all.
More thoughts on opportunities. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So, sorry, going back to life in a business school, I think we need to put something in our annual activity report on DEI to call attention to its centrality. And then more than that, we have teaching awards, research awards, service awards, and I will suggest that we create a DEI award for both faculty and staff. And we have a great party. You guys can come. We invite families, and it's super fun and a celebration. So, you know, I think that would bring a little bit more weight to its centrality in our community.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
So we have about 7 different pillars in the School of Education where we look at all different levels of DEI, and I think there's actually opportunities in every single one, but I'm going to try to go really quickly. So the first is with our policies and procedures. So one thing that we really did is looked at, are we being gatekeepers? Why are we accepting some people, not accepting others? We spend a lot of time with my enrollment team really dissecting the data to make sure that we aren't omitting anyone into the, from coming to the university that should be here. And I think it's something that's ongoing. And so we're really looking at pushing against some of those barriers that exist in education because we're a little bit different. We have a lot of state regulations. And we're also speaking up at the state level as well because the state sometimes will tell us things that we also will disagree with. And I think that there are diversity, equity, and inclusion implications there. We look at the curriculum. One aspect that I usually say is I want students to be critical consumers of the curriculum, which means they're constantly looking at everything you do and why you do it. And with faculty, looking at who are the authors of the articles students are reading. Is it diverse? And really asking ourselves some difficult questions. Now that's in the faculty purview, but it's really stopping and thinking about what am I displaying or modeling for my students. I think when we get to the climate and environment, it's thinking about how do I interact with people? If I say hello to some people and not others, it's something as simple as that. We've actually had coordinators who have said, you know, I was just being friendly, but I got a note afterwards from someone saying, thank you for making me feel welcome. So it's taking the time to acknowledge the fact that someone even exists, which I think is really easy for everyone to do. professional development, we do it all the time, but really engaging and then telling, especially leaders, if there's something else that you want, letting us know, because I can't read everyone's mind, but it's important to make sure everyone has a voice. When we look at recruitment and retention for our personnel, one thing that I think is really important, especially for faculty, is kind of breaking down what does it take to get to tenure. So, for example, my associate dean meets with our non-tenured faculty every single month to help guide them through this process, and so it's not a mystery anymore, because especially if you don't have anyone who that you're friends with that went to a university or was a faculty member, you may not know. So it's getting rid of some assumptions that we have. Student enrichment, I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to start to push our students on how do we interact with each other, how do we make sure that you're really prepared to go out in the world and positively impact every single human being. And lastly is how are we engaging the community? What are we doing with all different stakeholders? So I think that there's opportunity in everything we do.
I want to make sure and get time to questions. Any other, and Cobb, we haven't really had an opportunity. I know you wanted to make sure to allow everyone else to talk, but I don't know if you have any thoughts now, having been here several months. I'm sure you have a great perspective on where we have opportunity.
Yeah, so the reason why I had put this together is because in the 4 months, or almost 4 months that I've been here, I've been taking time to meet with various groups across campus, to listen, to learn, and to be informed about what we're doing in the DEI space. And I hope that today all of you out there have now had sort of a flavor of what I've been experiencing for the last 4 months. So that's why I'm always energetic and inspired, because I get to meet with folks like this. And this is not comprehensive of all the other individuals out there that are doing great work in this space. And so I feel energized and inspired, and I hope that all of you are also energized and inspired, and to know that this is a journey for all of us. In order for us to embed inclusion, we need all of your help. And one takeaway that I'm going to share from today, and it's also a takeaway from all the other meetings I've had, is that we are doing great work. We are committed to embedding inclusion in everything that we do. But what I'm also seeing is that we tend to be very siloed. We stay within our area, and we have no idea what is happening in all the other areas, all the great work, all the long hours and great efforts that are being poured into diversity, equity, inclusion. And so this has really even opened up my eyes more that the Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, one key goal that I'd like to pour resources into is, what does all of this amount to? What's the impact? What is the outcome? How do we align all of these great initiatives so that we can really see the change that we want to see?
Okay. All right, now we are going to open up for the question, comments. Again, this is about a discussion, bringing everyone together. We are going to have some floaters, lovely floaters with microphones, and you can raise your hand when you want to say something, but just to kind of set some expectations for this part of the program. This is an opportunity to share comments and questions. You can specifically ask a panel member, or open it up to the entire panel, or if it's just a comment, whatever you want to share. But do keep in mind, this is a safe and brave space. Please share time and be respectful, of course, of everyone's voice. So please raise your hand if there's something you'd like to share, talk about from your part of the university, or comments or questions that you might have for panel members. Anyone?
Hi, my name. Can you hear me? Great. My name is Jamie. I'm in UDAR, and we've really been intentional on our search committees as we work with HR to be mindful of best practices. And I've been frustrated, and I don't know what the HR field is showing you, Michele, on inability to really recruit a diverse talent pool. I don't really know what is out in the field, but can you speak to that and any efforts we're doing along those lines?
I'd be happy to speak to that. I think, first of all, in many ways, we in Human Resources share your frustration because we think this is the most fabulous place to work on earth. I think a couple of things that we have done to try to get a better handle on this. First of all, it varies from discipline to discipline or field to field, the pool of applicants or the diversity of that pool that we can recruit. And I will say, firsthand experience, we do have difficulty with any position related to development philanthropy. We are definitely challenged. It's a difficult to recruit area when it comes to diverse applicants. The other thing that we have found that we're challenged by is we do have a reputation out there, and the community knows that reputation. And so we have work to do in helping our entire community understand that we are, in fact, a welcoming and inclusive place, not only to study, but also to work. And so we are starting to do a little bit of work around that. I worked with a project team as part of the action plan to combat racism. And one of the things that we did is we incorporated an applicant experience survey. So now at the end of every search, we actually send a survey out to everyone who was part of that to try to get a better sense as to why applicants are experiencing difficulty when it comes to applying here at St. Thomas. I think while we tend to do better with recruiting diverse applicant pools, where I start to get a little bit more concerned is actually on the retention side. If I look at our turnover data with respect to our staff over the last few years, we tend to turn over more of our employees who identify as people of color than our white employees. And we're not getting a good reason for that in terms of what we're hearing in the exit survey data. Much of the response has to do with salary, supervisor, things like that, which I guess is a silver lining. It's not things that are related to bias and harassment. But the fact that we tend to turn over our staff of color at a higher rate than our white employees is concerning, and that's something we need to do a little bit more work on. There are best practices that we're looking at, such as mentoring or buddy programs for our employees of color. How do we do career development to address the specific barriers that our employees of color face when it comes to looking for promotional opportunities? Those are things that we're actually taking some time to research and try to work on.
Nikisha, you were talking earlier about retention too with students. I know.
Yeah, so a couple of different things there. So I'd like to first say I absolutely agree. So ditto with the idea of it can be somewhat difficult because of our reputation. Along with that, when we talk about it's almost this idea of if one can vouch that St. Thomas is a safe space, so i.e. a person of color can vouch that this is a safe space, then you're more likely to have perhaps this person of color that may be willing to come and stay in the space. And so it's a culture piece probably more than anything that can be difficult at exit interviews, or people may not be as willing to share at exit interviews. One example, though, that I do want to provide of a situation where St. Thomas did do this very well was upon my arrival at St. Thomas in 2009, where at one point we had 9 Black faculty members just in the School of Business, which means that it is possible, but our dean at that time was very intentional about that approach. Now, we've maintained most of them with that being said, but it's the idea that they were very intentional about their approach, very intentional in the relationships beyond just the advertisement of the positions, but also within the groups that are connected to those groups that they trust. So I think it's more of a trusting factor beyond just, are we advertising there? Are we promoting those jobs there? But then is there someone that we trust there that will also vouch for the space being open, honest, and a place where they can work and thrive? Along those lines, research has also shown in particular for Black people in professional fields that's been a concern for Minnesota as well. So it's dual compounding there, I think, for a couple different groups, that they're just having difficulty retaining in the area, which may be a culture of the state or the city, not just at St. Thomas. And so not to take some pressure off of ourselves, but we're living inside of the city as well. And so as a city, perhaps St. Thomas could be the leaders in changing that.
Opening it up.
I want to address that because I'm in the middle of a search process right now for a director of development, and I'll have some recommendations for change about how we do that. Because I think that one of the things that happens when you're recruiting, especially high-level candidates, and I have to say that Julie and Richard did an excellent job of recruiting me. the outcome was really good for St. Thomas because I wasn't looking to move. Is, you know, the best candidates out there for the roles that we want, especially in philanthropy. Everybody's trying to seek people with similar skills, and so because we tend to be pretty homogenous, it's really hard to attract a high caliber candidate who has many choices. And so how you position yourself with the search firm, the questions you ask. I mean, I would say that the one thing that you should never do is say, we want you because you're a person of color or you're bringing diversity here. And there have been just a few times now where I've thought, you know, I don't know what the search firm or others are saying. And so I think we need probably more development, you know, like training, support for supervisors or people, but we'll get better and better at it. But it's really just hard to recruit right now generally for different positions. There may not be anything going on, but as a hiring supervisor, and I've literally hired hundreds of people over the years, not here, but in other positions, when you signal to a candidate of color that perhaps the only reason why they're actually in the pipeline is because they're a person of color, that's a huge turnoff. Nobody wants to be here because of their race to improve your diversity numbers. That shows that we are an organization that is not culturally competent because it's embedded in that stereotype that somehow if you were a person of color, you had to have an additional lift or that you weren't as qualified, but they made an exception. And that's just sort of the implicit bias we have. So I'll give you an example of this. One time, this was not here or anywhere else, at Wilder, some other employer. Anyway, the hiring manager basically said, well, you know, I would be willing to consider these candidates if they met the minimum qualifications, if they're people of color. Well, they all met the minimum qualifications already. Why would you think that a person of color who actually was in the pipeline didn't meet the minimum qualifications? But because of the way she was talking about it, it made the person feel less than qualified. And so, you know, this is very important during that whole discernment process. So I think there are some things we could do. And I think, you know, even with people who have hired a lot at St. Thomas who've had really good success rates, kind of, you know, we always look at it from a place of weakness. We should look at it from pockets of strength. I mean, what has the Opus College of Business done? Or, you know, there's a lot to learn from other parts of St. Thomas. So that's leaving you with maybe a couple of solutions. But ultimately, in the end, it's the candidate's choice. And we have to do a good job of selling St. Thomas. Having a reputation that says people of color don't belong or feel that they belong probably doesn't help. And I'm not saying that that's what the reputation is out there, because I'm here and I'm a person of color. And I really like St. Thomas, and that's why I came. So it's just reflecting what reality is actually like and making sure that your candidates know that.
Just a point of clarification, I think the search that Mike Howe is referring to is one where we actually outsourced it to a search firm. When it's done internally, we actually do quite a lot of training with the search committee. The talent team works with them very closely, hand in hand. And I would say, yes, there is an opportunity for us to be a much better and I think clearer partner when it comes to outsourcing our searches to actually get the search firms that we're retaining to understand what are actually our core values, how does our process work, and how do we want that outcome to be achieved when we work through a process like this.
More questions, comments? Would love to.
Hi, Ryan Wyans. I am actually an alum, a class of '07, and I'm the executive director of the National LGBT Realtors Association Foundation. Dr. Lang and I have had some conversation over the last couple weeks, as well as I think a few of you. Something that Dean Lenway said to open up the panel really resonated with me, and that was that poster of the 4 white men had been there for so long it was hard to take down. My question is, well, I suppose my comment is, in the 100-year history of this university, exclusion is the predominance, unfortunately. I look at the panel right now and there's one man sitting on it, whereas 40, 50 years ago that wouldn't have been possible, let alone one white man. So the reputation and the perception in the community is one of a very long-lasting legacy of exclusion. How do we, both alumni and current community members, battle that in the public sphere?
Who would like to take that one?
Now it's on? Okay. So I have just a very short answer, and it's not a complete answer. It's one thing. We've noticed some of the same things with faculty development opportunities in STEM that we've created out from requests from our faculty. So they're telling us what kinds of things they think they need, and we're providing those. And initially we thought if we could get 15 people to come to these monthly sessions, that would be great. Well, we have between 22 and 32, and it's usually right around 25, 26. So people are interested, but you look around and there's 20 women and 3 men. And I think for a very long time, the work of diversity, equity, inclusion has been seen as work for people of color, work for women, work for LGBTQ+, work for the people who are discriminated against, oppressed, and until we have people who are in power in STEM, that is largely men, and in particular white men, until we have more white guys in the room, things won't change because the power doesn't rest with the people who are trying to do the work. So that's my short answer. We need to get people in power, and we need to get grassroots. We need it both.
So when you think historically, higher education as a whole has been exclusionary to people of color. It's not only a St. Thomas issue, it is higher education as a whole. Unless you went to a historical black college or now you're going to a Hispanic serving institution. So it is not inclusion of St. Thomas issue, it is a higher education issue. What I think the difference is that we have in the last few years, and specifically so, humbly showed up to the table and say, we are wrong, we're flawed, but we're willing to learn. And it's when you have that humble humility to understand that you can do better, that you should be doing better, that you have leadership saying, I will be doing better, that's when you start changing culture. Someone has been here for 14 years who has a son that graduated from St. Thomas. I would say that we have a long ways to go, but I have seen enormous change happening at St. Thomas. All of us sitting in this panel have a choice of where we could go to work and where we could, we have as people of color very much opportunities for diversity, yet you should ask yourself, why did I choose to be sitting here today? And I choose to be sitting here today because I feel this is a place that is inclusive, a place where I feel I can grow, a place where I feel most of all proud that my son graduated from the University of St. Thomas, and he's proud to tell people to do that. But home sometimes has messiness. Sometimes at home we have complicated relationships. Sometimes we find ourselves not in agreement with those that are in our home. But ultimately, when we love that home, we will work on that home. And St. Thomas has been a home to many, many, and will continue to do so. And I think the difference is the humbleness in which we're showing up very publicly today to let all of you know that we know we're not perfect, but we're willing to grow. And it's that willingness for which I'm very thankful for, and allows me to come back to work to do diversity and inclusion in St. Thomas, because otherwise I would have a choice to go work somewhere else tomorrow. But I love this place, I love what it has done for me, and most of all what it has provided for my son, that I trusted St. Thomas to educate my son. So I think you as an alumni also have an opportunity to change that perspective, and you as an alumni have an opportunity to join us in doing this work, and asking yourself as an alum, what is it that I can do to help you grow? Because it is branded with your name as an alumni of St. Thomas, and I know you would want it to do better.
I also think that there's a lot of opportunities. So in my unit, we've talked about sending out newsletters to alumni, and we sent our first one last year, and now we're looking at how frequently do we need to send that out to let people know. The reason why we have the monthly racial literacy roundtable discussions is for that exact reason, to kind of change how the community sees us and make sure that they understand we are inclusive. So on average, just so you know, I tend to say, I think we have around anywhere between 60 to 100 people every month, and it's not all individuals just from St. Thomas who come to those events. And as I continue to go around to different school systems, I always say, let me get your email, we'll send it out to you. And what we're finding is more school systems today are contacting us saying, how are you working to diversify teaching? What are some of the initiatives that you're doing? And I can tell you that it has been a resounding thank you from a lot of people. But I do think that this is an area that's challenging. It's hard to let people know what you're doing.
I think in addition to what everyone has said, I guess I want to reiterate that it's important for us to do the work first and then like rebuild trust in the community. So as somebody who was raised in Minneapolis, I can attest to the reputation of St. Thomas that people have talked about. And so, or affirm that reputation. And so I think if we can focus on how we create a space where people can show up authentically as opposed to trying to assimilate into the culture of St. Thomas, develop relationships in community, show humility. I feel like that should be our focus as opposed to how do we change the perception so that we can earn the trust of marginalized communities in our neighborhoods.
I think as the student body becomes more diverse and we graduate more alumni, that will change. And the type of experiences that they have, which, you know, is student affairs and all of us, that will help to do it. But, you know, there's the, I mean, you can do great marketing and, you know, telling people about where you're at, but the experiences of the people who are actually the closest to St. Thomas are the most important ambassadors. So all of you are the most important ambassadors, the people who are listening and understanding and bearing witness, and also assisting with the culture change, and assisting as in leading the culture change, not just watching it happen, although that's important too. So, because regardless of what we say out there, if it's not true inside of here, St. Thomas, it's going to be a false brand, and people will know that. So that's why it's really important to understand that the work of the DEI journey is everybody's journey, and it's our collective challenge and our collective action to take together, which means we don't do it alone, and we don't leave people in the dark. We also don't leave students alone or each other, because the reality is that racism is not just about any one person. It's a social dynamic. It's set in a historical, economic, and political context. It was created way before us, it lives with us, and it will be created in the future if we don't dismantle it. So I said this in a Dean's Council meeting today, that racism impacts both the oppressed and the oppressor. So until we recognize that as an institution, that we are a part of the problem and we can also be a part of the solution, to me that gives me a lot of relief, actually, because that means we can undo some of the things that we are living with from maybe generations ago. But that's the challenge for the current generation, and that's also the biggest opportunity, and we can do it because we're St. Thomas, right? We can do it. We can do it together, but don't do it alone, because this concept of social justice is really about collective action. You cannot create social justice as an individual. You must create it together. You must harness the power to actually do good together. And that's actually one of the core things that St. Thomas is about. So we have to recognize that if we're complicit, how do we not be anymore? And how do we change it? And also how to not be defensive, because we have been around for a long time. And so the tendency to say, oh, well, it's not so bad. Well, you know what? People are kind of telling us it's bad. So face the music, just move on, and let's figure out how to solve it together, not alone.
Love that message. Before we get to our closing remarks, how about a big round of applause for our incredible panel members? We sure appreciate your honesty and sharing in all this, and all of you for being here. Now, for our closing remarks, I'd like to introduce Dr. Richard Plum, our provost.
Thank you, Vanita, and let's give Vanita a hand for moderating this. I want to kind of close the way that President Sullivan opened. When I look out at the group today, I see 200 individuals. Each of us are unique beings. We've been shaped by our life experiences. We heard from our panel today of why their DEI journey is important to them. And I just want to share with you mine very quickly and give you a task to do afterwards. I grew up in upstate New York, some learning disabilities, went to a high school with 4,000 students. 3,996 of them were white. They looked just like me. It wasn't until I became a freshman at Syracuse that I looked around and saw things are different. That's when I began my DEI journey, is when I was a freshman at Syracuse University. And for me, the journey is very personal, and it's also very communal. But for me, it's based in my faith. So I want to share with you just a reading from Genesis and tell you why this is so important. God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. We know God is good. We know God is love. Everything that God does is out of love. He created us as a community. When any one of our members is suffering, we all suffer. We're called to help one another with the experiences that we bring, with the privileges that we've had, with the shortcomings that we've encountered on our journey. But we're in this together. It's a personal journey that we all have, but we're in this together. It's a communal journey. And the thing about journeys, it's a long road, and sometimes the road is uphill. I mean, it gets kind of tiring going uphill. There are times when the road is long and straight, and we make a lot of progress. There are rocks in the road, and we trip and we fall. But when we do this journey together, when we trip and fall, we can help each other up. That's why this is a journey we cannot do alone. We have to do it as a group. I want to thank everyone for coming today, for being part of our journey, thanking our panel members for sharing their stories. So here's my challenge for you. Go out and talk to somebody that you normally don't talk to. Ask them what their journey is and see if you can help them as they go along. So thank you again for coming, and have a wonderful afternoon.